Hello everybody, I am Dan Selke, the editor at winteriscoming.net. I'm here with Cheryl Wassenaar, the editor at Culturist.
Hi Dan.
Hello Cheryl. And we wanted to weigh in on a bit of breaking news that came out recently involving Amazon Studios and a beloved high fantasy property.
Yes, Lord of the Rings.
Yes. The gist of it is Amazon is going to make a Lord of the Rings TV show.
Yep.
Just to give you a bit of background, because it's pretty good, it's pretty big. Jeff Bezos, the CEO of Amazon, fabulously rich, fabulously powerful, decided to focus more on fantasy and getting like a big giant hit. So he gave marching orders to his execs to bring him the next Game of Thrones, essentially, which is the current big giant fantasy hit.
Yes, I think that's a good way of putting it. If a little bit of an understatement.
Bit. And long story short, his people talked to j.r.r. Tolkien's people, the estate, bought the rights to make a Lord of the Rings TV show for a rumored $250 million, which is an ungodly amount of money to pay for the rights to even make a show.
Yeah.
Not even, although that is a rumored figure, we don't know that for sure. And now it's going forward. They've committed to multi-season show already. So this is a huge investment for them. And I guess the question that's going around is what they want going to happen? Could this be the next Game of Thrones? And what does that even mean, the next Game of Thrones?
I don't know if it actually means anything, Dan. I think it's a very simple way of encapsulating a much more complex problem, which is how do you make a TV show that's going to grab the attention of fans worldwide with such crossover appeal? We've talked about it before. And how do you make that show in such a way that you can guarantee that that's what happens? And I think that guarantee is really the problem here. I don't think that even with this multi-season commitment and the huge amounts of money that Amazon can throw at this, that it's going to be...
They can throw a lot of money at it, just to be clear.
Let's be clear here. Amazon has money to burn.
It's Amazon. You buy everything you want from there.
Yes. So I think that even with that money issue, I don't think there's a way that Amazon can necessarily make sure that they have the next Game of Thrones here if that's what they're specifically looking for.
No, I mean, there's no way to guarantee it. You can't.
No.
Because one of the great things about Game of Thrones was that as big as it is, it's easy to forget that it did grow sort of organically. I mean, it was a big risk from the start.
Yes.
But it was by no means the phenomenon it became at the start.
Oh no, they had to reshoot the entire pilot. They had to recast roles. It started quite inauspiciously.
And the first season or two, they had good but not ridiculous ratings. It worked its way up. And I feel like something like this, a Lord of the Rings show, they clearly, with all the money they're putting into it, they want to come out of the gate being a phenomenon.
Exactly.
And I'm not sure you can manufacture a phenomenon.
No, I think that's kind of the experiment they're trying here. And
that is true.
And even though it is Amazon who has managed to take over, online shopping and has done really well in that front, and still has Prime Video, but I think they're trying too hard here. Might be the phrase to use, just because. I don't think that the next giant TV phenomenon is going to look like Game of Thrones. That's a point that a lot of TV critics have been making on Twitter.
Right. I think that's very true.
And I think the next big thing, I guess, is going to be a response to Game of Thrones, in the sense that you I think about, this is going to be a weird analogy, it's kind of like parenting. There's a theory in psychology that you parent your own children as a response to the way your parents raised you.
I can see that, actually.
And I'm not a psychologist, so any psychologists in the audience, please be...
Literally armchair psychologists right now.
We are literally armchair psychologists right now, so please be kind to me if this is not an actual psychology theory. But I read it somewhere that's kind of, it's a response to, so you take what was good and you work on what was bad, or what was not so good. And I think that's kind of what's going to happen in TV with the next big thing, is it's not going to look exactly like Game of Thrones.
Right. I mean, when I hear the next Game of Thrones, what that really means is it means success. It means money. They want it to be a giant hit. It doesn't mean they want to revolutionize television, because I mean, how can something that actually revolutionized TV, like I'd say Game of Thrones, can at least make a claim to that?
I would say that's a fair
can't
claim.
revolutionize something by kind of aping the revolutionary.
Right.
Which, by the way, let's address this. There is a lot of irony in saying that a Lord of the Rings TV show would ape Game of Thrones, when Lord of the Rings is the original granddaddy high fantasy that influenced Song of Ice and Fire very much.
Right.
But I mean, when we're talking TV shows, we're talking in this space of a TV space, not in terms of the story.
Right, definitely. And I think that also the problem is kind of that we're thinking that Amazon's trying to make this Game of Thrones, and I think that it's definitely a case of follow the leader, as you say.
Right.
And I think that also it just, I don't know how exactly to put it, but it just seems like it's too much of a follow the leader issue, I guess, if that makes sense. And I think even and even so, I think that Lord of the Rings, you know, if the thing is to make Game of Thrones and they want Lord of the Rings to be Game of Thrones, it doesn't seem like it quite fits. Tolkien's world is a little more, slightly more cut and dried.
It definitely is.
There's a little less room for moral ambiguity.
Far less incest, far less...
definitely less incest.
A lot less. Just less backstabbing, less political machinations. Yeah, but that's fine. That's what it is. It's a little more black and white. That's the appeal of it.
That is the appeal of it. But even so, it just seems, I guess, like an odd choice in that sense. If the goal here is to get something as big as Game of Thrones, then again, even in the TV front, I've read a lot of pieces recently about how like the big broadcast hits are This Is Us and The Good Doctor, which are more black and white, unabashedly emotional feel-good.
No, so maybe that reaction you were talking about, maybe it's already starting?
It might be already starting.
I mean, there's also a theory, Variety's Alison Herman wrote a cool article about how not only can, I mean, she didn't write this part, it was written a while ago, but not only will this can this not be the next big thing, there can't really be another bigger thing after Game of Thrones, because and this is kind of her theory, I'm not saying I endorse this, but the article is basically saying that Game of Thrones is a product of the TV landscape kind of opening up in a way where this show could finally be possible with these kind of resources.
Yes.
And this kind of penetration. And part of the reason it was a success was because it was new, a kind of thing that you literally couldn't do this before.
No.
And it's you can't really follow that up with another bigger, bolder, kind of sort of samey thing and expect it to have the same novelty and the same bring people together.
Right. I think that's actually a really valid theory. And, you know, even thinking bigger, you know, when you said bigger and we're talking about the Lord of the Rings show, the first thing I thought of was money. Even though,
I mean, a $250 million commitment for the rights. That's before they spend $1 on a camera.
Or casting.
Yes.
Oh, can you imagine how big the payroll for this show is going to be?
You know, they were even talking about, not to go off too far, but
do it.
Maybe they can, because the deal does involve New Line Cinema, maybe they could get Ian McKellen to come on back for a second.
Oh, that would get people to tune in.
I mean, this should be our next topic. I mean, just in terms of, would you watch this? You seem very resistant.
See, I can't definitively say yes or no.
I mean, I would totally watch it. I mean, we're talking about is it going to be next Game of Thrones? Is it valid artistically or whatever? I would totally watch the Lord of the Rings series. Yes, I would. I'd watch the first episode, see how it went.
See, I would at least have to look at the first episode and see what exactly they did to you, what exactly they're doing, and what exactly they're going for.
It will be fascinating to see if any of these kind of talks bleed into it, if they're really interested in adapting the story as it is, or if they're we need to make it more like the last big thing that was big, so we're going to change things around.
Right. I mean, the didn't the press release say that it's going to be pre-Fellowship?
The press release said it's going to feature, I might be misquoting a little bit, feature stories preceding what happened in Lord of the Rings, which does not disqualify the idea that it could include Lord of the Rings proper, which is the story everybody knows.
Right.
But also that it will have other things before it.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, right there is kind of alarm bells, right?
A little bit, definitely.
Because wasn't The Hobbit sort of, we're gonna add stuff and fill in other gaps and
that's how they turned a relatively short book into 3 movies.
And those have aged. I mean, at least in terms of people talking about them online, they've kind of become objects of hate.
A little bit.
And they were terrible, so justified.
There you go with the hot.
I'm not sure how you thought about them, but
I've thought about them a little, but no, I definitely think that I actually read this piece today in Entertainment Weekly, asking about whether they're going to make young Gollum show up and have him be really handsome, and
you could say it. The actual title was "Should Young Gollum Be Hot?"
It was, and that title alone made me cringe a little. But I think that the point of the article was valid, and the point basically was you have to have something that people recognize. So, we all recognize Gollum. You can still say, my precious in the creepy voice and have people understand what reference you're making. So I think in the sense of where do you adapt, it almost makes sense for Amazon to go somewhere that even casual fans can recognize. But at the same time, then you start running into the whole, well, how long is it going to take them before we get into Fellowship of the Ring?
Right. Also, I mean, about something you need to recognize, I mean, again, that's what Game of Thrones did not do. Like, I mean, yes, it was a successful series, the book series, but most people didn't know it. It had to catch on to it slowly over time, and it built kind of organically.
Right.
Again, goes back to a phenomenon kind of happens by itself versus what Amazon's trying to do, which is like make a phenomenon, like make it in a shop and then put it out and just bam.
Right.
Particularly when the movies are not that old and are still very fondly remembered. I mean, they are 15 years now, but
16 for
16, okay.
Fellowship of the Ring.
Easily within living memory.
In living memory is a good way to put it.
Nobody born when Fellowship of the Ring came out can buy alcohol legally.
This is a good way of putting
it that way.
So yeah, I think it just alarm bells, I think, is a good way of putting it. I'm concerned about what Amazon's trying to do here and how much meddling there's going to be in how the show turns out and what the show covers and what it looks like. And, sure, are we going to probably turn into the first episode and see what happens?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We're not making any bones about that. But do people stick around for the second episode? What is the thing that makes them say, I have to see episodes 2, 3, 4, 5, how many is in the season? I mean, with Game of Thrones, you had that in Bran getting pushed out a window at the end of the first episode.
What a lovely way to start. Again, and that's a twist that someone not only wouldn't see coming because they don't know the story, but just something you don't see in most glossy TV shows.
No, a child is getting pushed out of a window.
Lord of the Rings not going to have that.
No.
We already know that. Well, here's a question for you. If this isn't the next Game of Thrones, whatever that means, do you think that anything could be?
I mean, in the sense of the next big show that kind of captures the world, maybe.
Put it out there.
Just put it out there. I think if there's anything on TV right now that maybe has a shot at this, and I'm not saying definite, I fully expect to fall flat on my face with this prediction.
Disclaimers.
You gotta start with the disclaimers before you make the hot takes. I think maybe something like The Handmaid's Tale has a shot, and I will tell you why.
Okay.
I think it has a shot because it is a response to Game of Thrones to get back to that theory, in the sense that it is more definitively focused on women and their stories, whereas the first couple seasons of Game of Thrones focused on even more than Daenerys, on people like
Ned Stark and Robb Stark.
And Robb Stark.
Jon Snow.
And Jon Snow. So in that sense, I think it's possible for something like The Handmaid's Tale to go far. It already has the critical love.
It does.
You know, first streaming series to ever win an Outstanding Drama Series Emmy. And we don't have viewing numbers for it in the same way that we do for Game of Thrones. But Hulu has said that at the time, it was their most watched debut ever.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's good to know.
So it's already starting to get that attention and buzz. Is it going to necessarily happen quite as organically or take as long, maybe? It could take longer. We already know that there's a season 2. It's starting production. And I think it's possible for something like The Handmaid's Tale to blow up in that sense. At the same time, though, it might be a problem just because it's a little less escapist.
I mean, I was going to say, if it really is a response to Game of Thrones, if Game of Thrones is like the blockbuster, and then Handmaid's Tale is more like the cool independent movie.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it.
But those don't get mass penetration the way Game of Thrones does. And,
I mean, Quentin Tarantino did a bunch of independent movies, and he
did, but I mean, Pulp Fiction is no Star Wars.
That's true.
As big as unpopular as it is.
That's true. But I think there's room for something like The Handmaid's Tale or something more sci-fi if genre's it right now.
Yes, it is.
So I think whatever is going to be the next big thing, it seems safer to guess that genre is still going to be the thing.
I mean, yeah, actually we've been talking about like what's the response to it. Maybe the response is lose any magic or sci-fi or fantasy at all and have something like Friends. I don't know, just a normal people in an apartment talking and laughing and loving.
But at the same time,
what can unite people like this?
And see, that's where genre has a strength, I think, in that it seems like it's easier to translate across because it's working in these very common tropes. You know, hero with 1,000 faces, if you want to get into the theory of it. So I think in that way, genre has a strength that makes it easier to get there. And
I get you. It's more appealing to a worldwide audience that way.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, I mean, I kind of agree with, more I think about it, more with Alison Herman. I'm not sure you really can have a hit that penetrates this deeply, given that there's a whole new set of rules that I think they're going to have to work through before they can bust them out again and do something that catches attention like this.
Yeah, the cultural zeitgeist has kind of shifted between now and Game of Thrones when it first blew up.
But we could be wrong. Maybe Lord of the Rings, Amazon's Lord of the Rings will be the next huge thing, and I'll just obsessively watch it over and over again. And we'll be talking about the episode titles and like the tiniest details, dissecting them, and it'll capture the world anew.
Yeah,
we'll have to wait for some point in, I don't know, 2019, 2020, before Amazon gets on that.
Yeah, don't put those magnifying glasses away just yet.
All right, well, this is a good time. Do you have any thoughts about what is the next Game of Thrones, or whether that even has any value as a term? Let us know.
Please
I am Dan Selke, the editor at Winter is Coming, and you are?
I'm Cheryl Wassenaar, editor of Culturist.
That's who you are. All right, have a good day, and Valor Morgulis.